Now don't judge me, but I've watched over 137 serial killer movies to date. Now this might make me a weirdo, but it's also allowed me to note down some of the most psychotic acting I've ever seen. So today, let's analyze the scariest serial killer performances of all time, ranking them all the way from mildly scary to performances so disturbing you'll want to shower after you finish the movie. Let's start our ranking by first talking about the mildly scary serial killers. Performances where the actor seemed normal for 99% of the time, but there was that 1%, that subtle, rare moment where you notice that something is off. A great example of this is Asami, a Japanese serial killer played by Ihi Shina in the 1999 movie called The Audition. And the thing is, you'd never suspect that anything is wrong with her. She played very innocent, maintaining the soft look, especially whenever she was in public. But when she was alone, moments like this would slowly arise. Look at this weird posture she sits with when waiting by the phone. Instantly transformed her innocent persona into something much darker. I remember personally watching this scene super late at night and genuinely considering turning it off at that moment. I literally just got a weird feeling looking at her in this type of position. Another great performance with that subtle darkness is shown in Creep, where Mark Douglas actually plays the most normal serial killer of the list. He'll actually behave totally normally to the point where you're almost thrown off by how casual he is.
Let's just save it.
But then, before you get too comfortable, he'll slip up. He'll randomly run away during your conversation, later finding him with a wolf mask in the front entrance. Or he'll stand right in front of your door, standing right behind you without making a peep. What really sold his performance is how he did all these weird, absurd things, but he purposely talks so casually. Like he's really just your friend and you have nothing to worry about. In fact, he'd be so casual about these extreme things, it would almost gaslight you into thinking it's normal. Like for example, at the end of his second movie, Creep 2, he very casually stabs himself and expects his cameraman to do the same, doing so they can die together
On the grave and we die together like Romeo and Juliet.
That is how deluded of a person he is. The scare factor came from the fact he behaves just like us, and that statement alone is truly terrifying. But now, let me now move on from this rare type of scene acting. Talk about performances that remained scary throughout the entire duration. Let's move on to the second category, the disturbingly scary performances. I want to start this category strong with a role that won an Oscar, the role of Annie Wilkes in Misery. The talented Kathy Bates plays Annie, who's a super fan of this book author.
How I'm your #1 fan and all.
An author she eventually kidnaps, forces him to write for her, and throughout the movie, I really want you to note her range. She will have repeated moments of getting worked up, unleashing this psychotic range, just really highlighting she isn't someone to be messed with. But then there's moments where that will completely flip. She will instead just stare out at the author and do nothing, almost like a programmed robot. Or in real time, you'll see her lash out, do something crazy, but then return completely normal.
See what you made me do? Oh, Paul, I'm sorry.
And that jump in energy level up and down, it made it such an engaging performance. There was no way for me to accurately predict what was gonna happen, and that's what really won me over. And the crazy part is, someone that does an even better job playing unpredictable is Jake Gyllenhaal from Nightcrawler. This man plays a psychopath that's overly obsessed with his work, trying to be the best crime news station in his entire town. But I want you to notice how that obsession boils over into his behaviors. Notice how his eyes never lock off. He will finish a sentence and carefully watch you when you answer.
Interns.
No, I know,
If you pay really close attention, there's these moments where these eyes just get very intense all of a sudden. On top of that, his tone is equally frightening. He will go on a date and compliment you with a tone so direct, so monotone.
I bet you're beautiful any time of the day.
It feels like it's AI. And the longer you watch the movie, the more you realized he was missing those human elements. And I know although he isn't a direct serial killer, his lack of care for human life, only treating death as his next big news break, is what made him so disturbing. More disturbing than many of the actual killers on today's list. Guys, I want to share some more mainstream performances with you guys, but before we do that, you need to see these two lesser known serial killers, because they are so disturbing, mainly because of how they look, but also because of subtle acting techniques. First, let's talk about the performance behind Ed Gein. Not in the 2025 Monsters remake, but in the 1974 movie played by Robert Blossom. If you didn't know, Ed Gein is based off a real serial killer who not only murders people, but also digs up dead corpses, including his mother. Of course, eventually doing the most bizarre, unhuman things with these dead bodies. And I want you to note how Robert was able to bring life into such a disgusting character, doing so by ingraining subtle techniques into his behavior. You'd occasionally catch a glimpse of his creepy smile whenever he was accompanied by a woman. Not only that, but you'd see this fidgeting in his hands whenever he had some sinister thoughts. This made him feel so grotesque, like he can't wait to get his hands on his prey. It just felt icky. It's amazing how even with a $200,000 budget for this movie, that's it, Robert Blossom was able to still bring such a disturbing, authentic performance to Ed Gein, doing this well before actual serial killer movies were even a thing. But let's now come back to the more calculated approach of acting. Let's talk about Anton Chigurh from No Country of Old Men. He's played by Javier Bardem, and the core reasoning behind his horror is the fact he is unfazed by anything. This man asked the worker 3 separate times,
"Where does he work?"
the exact same question. No matter the response he got,
"Where does he work?"
notice how he would just repeat his line in the exact same tone over and over again. A similar thing happens here at this gas station. This man clearly must just hate employed people, because once again he ends up bantering with this worker. You notice his eyes remain completely locked on. He continues to provoke and belittle this man who you can see is showing all types of feelings and hurt, while of course Anton is completely unfazed. And throughout the movie, he'd make very distinct acting choices. The way he sits, or the way he stares off delicately. Even the way he would very quickly change his expressions.
What use was the rule?
These are all things that made him feel inhuman. We can see that he is not processing things the way that we do. But with that being said, someone that does a much better job at this is Anthony Hopkins, because he plays Hannibal Lecter, also keeping in mind that his character just isn't human. He will stab someone and keep the knife inside of them with a completely straight face, instead taking this very calming approach, telling the victim to relax, to just let it happen. And when he isn't speaking, his attentiveness to others is disturbing.
Don't you think?
Turn it down then, see what kind of terms you get from children.
Here, when he's getting threatened by someone,
Are these threats, William?
I'm waiting, doctor, or maybe you've got nothing left to sell.
where you'd usually see an expressive, wild reaction, Hopkins instead shows a layered reaction, where you can see his literal ear moving. This made him feel so deep and raw, because it's like he's feeling every word so deeply. But because he's a calculated cannibal, he won't reveal how he actually feels. And that level of self-restraint is why this performance is named one of the best of all time. Without taking much more time on these obvious picks, you have to quickly add Mads Mikkelsen, who also plays Hannibal Lecter, but in the 2013 TV show, because he has very similar manners, and in fact he would sometimes take things up a notch and behave in this robotic type of way, where we would watch him move with such perfection, such delicacy, and no one would ever believe a man this professional is the same man that feeds you human meat at his dinner table. Amazing. Now, I'm about to get controversial by saying none of the performances so far have made it to the top of the tier list, the human nightmare level. This is because our video today is me ranking the scariest performances of all time, not the best actor. There is a very key difference there, because I can watch Hannibal multiple times over and over again. Because sure, he is scary, but it's more of a psychological scare, not a I can't watch this type of scare. Which is why this is fascinating, because these next two performances I'm going to talk about, I genuinely wouldn't want to watch again. That's how bad it is. Let's start off with this 1983 movie that's banned across many countries. Let's talk about Angst. In this movie, Anton Lecter plays a serial killer that just got out of prison. Of course, within the same day, he finds himself randomly breaking into a house and brutally terrorizing the entire family. But here's why this is different. Starting with the acting, you can obviously see he is very weird. He will constantly move around with this paranoia, with this visible agitation throughout the movie. And when he first sneaks around this house, genuinely looks like a gremlin. A look that only gets scarier when he finally attacks. We now see these very up-close shots that make him so disgusting. It really feels like I am there in the moment, getting strangled by this ugly looking creature. There's so many close-ups like this where the mouth is just filled with saliva and we see it in such detail. I believe it's such a bold technique they used, and it brought out the gross nature from this character in a way that I haven't seen from many other movies. But what if I told you that isn't even the most disturbing part? Because the real scare is the fact that this is the entire movie. From minute 26, when he first breaks into the home, all the way until minute 57, all we see is this killer inside of the home, beating people up, doing other things I can't even mention on the site. And it's all happening in this confined place with this looping, nauseating soundtrack. And since the movie doesn't cut away to another setting, another subplot, we are left choking, literally drowning in this uncomfortable setting for the entirety of the movie. Guys, please do not watch this movie or any of the other movies I mentioned in this category. And oh my god, especially not the next one I'm about to talk about, The Golden Glove. Golden Glove is a German movie where our main serial killer, Mr. Fritz, is maybe the ugliest looking character you'll ever witness. He has a hideous nose, crooked teeth, even this lazy eye you can see in these up close angles. Already he's frightening, but on top of that, there are these subtle acting techniques he implements to bring that ugliness out. Take for example his completely broken posture whenever he moves throughout his day, whether it's him walking or simply seated. Or we can point towards his way of communication, saying the most disgusting things with a completely straight face. These are all things that subconsciously shape him up to be something you instantly just don't want to be around. And the crazy part is, he gets even scarier when he's in the middle of his attacks. Like here, after he smashes a bottle over this girl, you notice his mouth has this weird hang to it, like a bulldog salivating at the sight of his food. His kill. It's also the fact he just isn't a careful person at all. He occasionally will just dispose his body parts into random bushes, or sometimes just store them inside of his wall. And he just gets more and more unhinged. It genuinely becomes hard for me to sit through 2 hours of watching this ugly creature be so darn reckless. Yes, I'll admit, it's not the acting alone that makes these two killers the most scariest of them all. There's the unique camera work, there's their very ugly different looks, but either way, it's what made their performances genuinely scary. Ladies and gentlemen, please remember I've watched over 130 serial killer movies, so I still have a lot of secret gems that I'll happily save for a future video if you guys want them. But for now, this is the final ranking of the scariest serial killer performances of all time. Let me know your thoughts on this ranking in the comments below, and if you want to see more acting reviews, click this playlist right here, and of course make sure you guys subscribe so I can see you guys next week. Deuces!